Tony Aguilar, a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel and Green Beret with 25 years of service, began the conversation by recounting his life after leaving the military. Contrary to the image of an activist or a career soldier turned humanitarian, Aguilar described a quiet transition into civilian life, working part-time at Lowe's Home and Garden Center in the lawn and garden section. He emphasized his desire for a low-profile existence, focusing on family life and community involvement, such as co-leading his son's Cub Scout den with his wife. This portrayal starkly contrasts with the public perception of him as a whistleblower and activist, highlighting his initial reluctance to seek attention or political engagement. Aguilar's narrative underscores a man who, after decades of military service and missing family moments, sought to dedicate himself to raising his son and contributing to the next generation. His decision to join the Gaza mission was not driven by ambition or activism, but by a sense of duty aligned with American ideals of humanitarian assistance. This background sets the stage for understanding his later criticisms and the personal risks he took in speaking out. Aguilar clarified his role in Gaza, emphasizing that he did not work directly for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF, but was employed by UG Solutions, a subcontractor responsible for the security component of the aid distribution operation. He described GHF as a shadowy and opaque organization with little public information available, operating under a prime contractor called Safe Reach Solutions, SRS. SRS, a for-profit entity, held the main contract and subcontracted various operational roles, including security and logistics, to companies like UG Solutions and others. This layered structure, Aguilar explained, complicated accountability and transparency. He noted that UG Solutions was the only subcontractor authorized to be armed, and any use of firearms at the sites was either by UG Solutions personnel or the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF. Aguilar's detailed explanation of the contracting framework highlights the complexity and potential for mismanagement within the humanitarian operation, setting the context for his later criticisms. When asked why he accepted the mission, Aguilar recounted receiving a call in mid-May from UG Solutions seeking recently retired veterans for a humanitarian security role in Gaza. Despite initial reservations about the company's background and the founder's unconventional entrepreneurial ventures, Aguilar was motivated by a belief in American exceptionalism and the ideal of stepping into a dangerous situation to help those in need. He consulted with his wife, who encouraged him to contribute his experience, and he accepted the mission with eyes wide open, aware of the risks and challenges. Aguilar's decision was rooted in a desire to be part of a genuine humanitarian effort, especially as the U.S. sought to replace the United Nations' role in Gaza. He expressed hope that the mission would reflect American values and provide meaningful aid to a starving population. This idealistic motivation contrasts sharply with the operational realities he later encountered, fueling his disillusionment. Aguilar firmly denied claims that he was fired, stating that he voluntarily terminated his contract in writing on June 13th, effectively resigning in protest. He positioned himself alongside other high-ranking personnel who had stepped down due to dissatisfaction with the operations management, including the former director of GHF and senior UG Solutions staff. Aguilar explained that he initially sought to remain involved by transitioning to a humanitarian assistance role within the operation to influence planning and procedures, but ultimately chose to resign when his concerns were not addressed. He challenged accusations from GHF and its leadership, particularly Johnny Moore, who publicly labeled Aguilar a liar and accused critics of being pro-Hamas. Aguilar rejected these attacks as baseless and motivated by self-interest, emphasizing his honorable military service and commitment to truth. He criticized Moore's lack of presence in Gaza and questioned his qualifications to lead such a complex humanitarian effort, framing the dispute as a clash between genuine expertise and superficial PR. One of the most damaging allegations against Aguilar involved signal messages in which he appeared to compliment the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation's management despite later criticizing their conduct. Aguilar explained that these messages were impact statements directed not to GHF leadership but to fellow UG Solutions contractors, intended to boost morale among exhausted personnel working long hours under difficult conditions. He stressed that these messages were part of a directive from UG Solutions' chief operations officer and did not reflect his private views on the leadership or operation. Aguilar highlighted the distinction between encouraging his team on the ground and holding leadership accountable. He maintained that he made his dissatisfaction clear directly to management through formal channels. This clarification undermines the narrative that he was complicit or supportive of the operation's failings and reinforces his role as a whistleblower rather than a collaborator. Contrary to claims that Aguilar was rarely present in the field, he provided evidence that he was on site daily from the start of the operation on May 24th. He took all the photos used by GHF in their public releases until his departure, documenting conditions and events firsthand. Aguilar recounted logistical challenges, such as the failure to budget for feeding local Palestinian volunteers working at distribution sites, which he and a colleague remedied by delivering pizzas from Israel to the workers. This hands-on involvement underscores Aguilar's commitment and contradicts accusations of absenteeism or lack of engagement. His detailed accounts of daily operations and interactions with local workers provide a vivid picture of the mission's realities and the operational shortcomings he witnessed. Since speaking out, Aguilar and his family have faced extensive personal attacks, including challenges to his military record and character. He responded by affirming his honorable discharge with 100% combat-related special compensation, a rare distinction recognizing his service-related disabilities. Aguilar detailed his command experience, including leading a Special Forces company and the U.S. Army Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape (SEE) school, countering claims that he lacked combat experience or leadership credentials. He expressed frustration at the baseless nature of the attacks, which he attributed to anonymous critics and online trolls lacking military experience. Aguilar positioned himself as a credible and honorable veteran, unjustly targeted for exposing uncomfortable truths, emphasizing the contrast between his service and the self-serving behavior of his detractors. Aguilar was highly critical of GHF's leadership, particularly Johnny Moore, whom he described as inexperienced and absent from Gaza. He questioned Moore's qualifications to run a complex humanitarian operation and accused him of using the foundation as a resume booster rather than a genuine mission. Aguilar highlighted the lack of transparency around GHF's funding and operations, noting that even members of the U.S. Congress were unaware of the source of the millions of dollars allocated to the foundation. He argued that GHF lacked the logistical capacity, expertise, and personnel to effectively deliver aid, contrasting it with the United Nations' established humanitarian mechanisms. Aguilar's critique extended to the foundation's public relations tactics, including deflecting criticism by labeling detractors as Hamas sympathizers, which he condemned as dangerous and dishonest. Aguilar painted a grim picture of the humanitarian situation in Gaza, describing food distribution sites located in active combat zones and the absence of water provision despite distributing dried food requiring cooking. He recounted witnessing IDF reservists firing live ammunition, including steel-core armor-piercing rounds, at unarmed civilians, including children, at distribution sites. Aguilar condemned the reckless use of force and the lack of rules of engagement or legal protections for American contractors operating under tourist visas. He detailed the logistical failures, such as insufficient feeding of local workers and the inability to provide water, which he described as inhumane and deliberate. Aguilar's first-hand accounts of these operational shortcomings and the resulting civilian casualties challenge official narratives and highlight the complexity and moral ambiguity of the mission. Aguilar shared his observations of the IDF's conduct and capabilities, noting that many soldiers deployed in Gaza were reservists with minimal training, thrown into a precarious and untenable combat environment. He criticized the IDF's leadership, discipline, and operational decisions, particularly the placement of humanitarian sites within active combat zones. Aguilar recounted conversations with contractors expressing moral distress over the violence and the shooting of unarmed civilians. He also described the psychological toll on IDF reservists and American contractors alike, who face cognitive dissonance between their actions in the field and their moral compass outside of combat. Aguilar predicted escalating violence and insurgency as the Israeli military transitions from offensive operations to occupation, warning of a grim and complex future for Gaza. Aguilar provided detailed testimony regarding incidents of civilian deaths at distribution sites, including a tragic event on July 16th where 20 Palestinians were killed in a stampede at Site Number 3. He challenged GHF's official narrative, blaming Hamas for inciting the stampede, citing hospital reports and eyewitness accounts that contradicted the Foundation's statements. Aguilar described the chaotic and dangerous conditions at the sites, including live fire and bottlenecks that made stampedes likely. He also recounted the case of a young boy named Amir who was killed during the operation despite GHF's attempts to discredit reports of his death using photos Aguilar himself had taken. Aguilar's efforts to connect with Amir's family and provide them with closure underscore the human cost of the operation and the Foundation's attempts to manipulate the narrative. In closing, Aguilar urged the U.S. government to cease funding the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and to re-engage with the United Nations' established humanitarian mechanisms. He argued that GHF lacked the capacity and expertise to effectively deliver aid, and that the U.S. should redirect resources to proven organizations with the ability to provide comprehensive assistance, including water, medical care, and nutrition. Aguilar called for clear political leadership to set firm boundaries with Israel regarding conduct in Gaza, warning of the dangers of unchecked occupation and escalating violence. He emphasized the need for the U.S. to be on the right side of history by supporting genuine humanitarian efforts and protecting vulnerable civilians, rather than enabling a flawed and militarized aid operation.